Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 2919 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. Coming to you on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live. Download our free app and stream all of our live local programming, including Solomon on Blast, the Jim Parisi Show, and the Jake Feinberg Show. We can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today. And happy holidays and Merry Christmas to everybody out there as we get an early gift from Santa. Straight in on the sleigh, Jim Keltner. Welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you, Jake.
How are you?
Nice to be back.
How you doing, man?
I'm good. I just dropped my phone and it shattered. Not my cell phone, my big old ancient AT&T landline. But I'll hold it as we speak.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, man. Well, listen.
Yeah. Other than that, everything's great.
All right. Well, good. Listen, I got an audio soundbite here from a guest of mine. I want you to just settle in, listen to it, and then we'll come back and talk about it. It's not like a name that voice kind of thing. Just settle in.
Okay.
Often my
musical journey,
somebody will
in the
do
Bay
a track.
Area, I noticed this amazingly different thing that happened when Tony Williams and Ron Carter came into playing with Miles. They no longer just played straight ahead, ding, 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 dotted eighth note to the 16th note swing, but they broke the time up.
Mm-hmm.
And that just messed me up. I said, wow, this is so beautiful. They're breaking up the time. There's freedom. And then all of a sudden, as on My Funny Valentine, all of a sudden they start going into time. And it was amazing. It just lifted my entire being. So that whole concept of no longer just playing hard bop, but breaking up the time and everybody having a space to create, and then all of a sudden, as the choruses went by, everybody started to swing the tune. That was a huge, huge thing. And then, of course, after that whole thing.
All right, Mr. Keltner. That was a guy. I'm not sure if you've ever crossed paths with Tommy Coster.
Mm-hmm. No, I don't think so.
The keyboardist for Santana for some time, was up in San Francisco. Actually worked with Steve Smith, your buddy, on drums.
Oh, yeah.
But what he was getting at was breaking up the time, the rhythm section, breaking up the time, and then coming back into time. And I wanted you to talk about just that concept and if, in fact, you were able to incorporate that into your playing, especially in your early days as a jazzer.
Well, by the time I heard Tony, I had already been into Elvin for a long time. So when Tony came along, to me, what I was hearing was a huge Roy Haynes influence, and he took, and what Tony did obviously was he took from everything that he had heard, all of the great jazz players that he had been exposed to, and he was so young. Don't forget when he came on the scene. So it's hard to say that when he was young, because
I know
he was like a baby, right? When he was hearing all
13,
this stuff.
15.
But the fact is that he came with with Roy, with Elvin, with Philly Joe. He was playing all of the stuff that he had heard before, and and he took it in a futuristic way. He took it to another place, which is, you can call it breaking up the time or whatever you want to call it. His ride pattern on the cymbal was extraordinary. He didn't play by any of the rules, the previous rules, but yet he knew all of the rules. You could hear it. You could hear Philly Joe clearly in his playing, but Roy is the one I heard mostly. and Roy is still playing today with that exciting kind of what's he going to do next kind of thing. He's so unpredictable, and that was Tony. You know, Tony took that to a high degree.
Did like I told you, I'm working on this film documentary for about on Stan Getz, and one of the pianists that played with him was talking about him as being an improviser from the old school, meaning if he didn't hear something, he would not play it. Okay, and the idea there is that so he would let the rhythm section fill in and maybe start their own theme, but ultimately he was not just going to play because it was his turn to solo. If he didn't feel it or he didn't hear it, then he wasn't going to play it. And what I'm getting at is the idea of the rhythm section. If you could talk in a personal fashion, because I know you guys growing up, Stinson and you were on the bandstand trying to emulate your idols. If you dug that, if you understood, if you tried to ultimately create themes through the rhythm section.
Oh, yeah. I mean, hey, you have to excuse me here for a sec. I'm sorry. This is not live, right?
No.
Okay, because I keep getting calls trying to come in.
You're a popular guy.
And it's very distracting. I don't know if you hear that.
I don't hear. I know. I can tell it's distracting you, but I mean.
Yeah, because I keep looking down, and then they keep calling back, and I don't know what to do about that. I probably can't do anything about that.
Well, unless it's somebody that is, unless it's a family, you want to take the call, or I mean.
No, they were numbers that I'm not that familiar with. But in any case, I'm sorry. So while you were asking that question, I was starting to lose it. What was the essence of the question again?
The essence is this. With Stan Getz, he was an improviser from the old school. He was not academically trained. He had huge ears. If he didn't hear it or feel it, he was not going to play. Okay, whereas you go to a kind of a jazz gig today, the leader of the band, if it's his turn to play, he's going to play. But what Stan did was allow the rhythm section to either finish a phrase, finish an idea, or start something new. And I wanted you to talk about you and Stinson doing something similar where you guys were, not breaking up the time, but ultimately, creating new ideas within the rhythm itself for the band.
Well, when you're very young, like the way we were, you're just playing, and you don't know what you're doing except you're just playing, and sure you're emulating like crazy. Albert, on the other hand, Albert was genius, and none of us really knew that, but he was a tremendous little genius guy. He always channeled Mingus. Mingus was his big hero, and I think for that reason, later on, his sound was so huge. He was known for that. All the players that played with him, Charles Lloyd from anybody you talked to who got to play with him in those days, say the same thing. His sound was huge, and he wasn't a big guy, but he emulated Charlie Mingus so well that's one of the main things he got from him. The ability to play and hear changes and play so fast and still be so creative and to be able to solo as well was something that was just innate. It was just, Albert was just born with it somehow. And I happened to be fortunate to be his friend, one of his friends, who became like his probably his best friend during that whole period. I always tell people that I was his barber.
Right, you looked after him. You had to get up, and if he OD'd, or we had to walk him around the block if he was too high. Yeah, we riffed on that.
Yeah. So, so we were really, really close friends, and I just, every time we played together, I sounded incredible, I thought. And it was a great lesson to have learned, when you're playing with people better than you at a very high level, you rise, hopefully. And but it's hard to do that when that's not the occasion. So that when we were playing with people, everybody sounded great. The whole band sounded way, way much better. We were in a little band at one point where it wasn't a jazz group. It was a little commercial band, and we had this gig up in the mountains. And Albert and I would try to spice up each song. We would I mean, I could hear him. We didn't talk about it. It wasn't anything you spoke of. It's just I could hear him playing a certain way, and I'd go with him a little bit. And then we'd get a look, so then we'd tame it down. And but on those gigs, the leaders and the other musicians would always say things like, "Man, when we play, they were blown away that you could hear the difference. You could feel the difference in the way the song went, like from a verse to another verse to a chorus to a bridge, and they weren't used to that. So we were very young yet. I'm talking very, very young at this point when I was playing jazz, and so that was always real interesting to me, and I took those words to heart. Later on, when you're making records, that's what it's all about.
When you say it was a commercial band, what kind of tunes were you playing?
Oh, we were playing, songs of the day.
Yeah.
For people to dance to, and for people to sit back and listen to and enjoy, and that they had heard that song on the radio a few hours ago. Now they're hearing a live band play it, and that sort of stuff. And we had a singer. We had a couple of different singers, and one was a girl, one was a guy. The girl was really good. The guy was pretty good, and so we would make these versions. We would play these versions of the current hit songs of the day, and people would like it. It was a good band for that kind of thing. But as I say, I mean, to get back to your question, there was I wasn't a part of this, but I can speak to what you were saying in that there was a bass player named Louis Large, who was a guy from Altadena, from where we all were living at the time, and he was a really great bass player. He was playing already when Albert was just sort of coming up, and so everybody paid attention. And then there was the drummer Mike Romero, who I've spoken of many times, and I don't know. I know I must have spoken about him with you.
No, I haven't heard about this cat.
Well, Mike Romero was the drum version of Albert, the drummer version of Albert.
Wow.
He was like I don't know if you'd call him a genius, but he was an amazing drummer, and he was very young. He was exactly the same age as Albert, as a matter of fact. And the two of them, when they would play together, not Albert, but when Louis Large and Mike Romero would play together, they would call out a number, and according to that number, they would play a certain groove. I guess what they used to do is practice together and stuff, and so they really prided themselves on being able to go 15, and then they knew what to play. They'd play some crazy thing, and I was always intrigued by that, and I always wanted to do it.
Yeah.
But it never worked that way for me, because I was always doing a different kind of thing somehow. I wasn't called upon to be a focus like those guys were.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. You know, one thing I'm so glad you reminded me. I mean, can you talk to the audience about you were going to perform at Robert Kennedy's some kind of the convention with Wilton Felder?
Yeah, I was.
Can you tell that story?
I was playing with Charlie Smalls at the time, and Charlie Smalls was the guy that wrote The Whiz.
Right.
He became famous for that later. But at that time, he was just, a brother lived in North Hollywood and with his little family. And we would rehearse. The bass player was Wilton Felder, the great Wilton Felder, who I knew as a sax player with the
Crusaders.
Jazz Crusaders.
Yeah, rest in peace.
But he was, yes, bless his soul. But he was an incredible bass player as well. And so he played bass on the gig, which really, to me, I mean, it made me feel like I was in the right place.
Yeah, that's more your zone, you know.
Yeah, because anyway. So then, I mean, Wilton. I don't know if many people know this, but Wilton played on one of the greatest Marvin Gaye hits of all time. Let's Get It On.
Dude, I mean, the guy was.
That's Wilton Felder.
No, I mean, he moved to L.A. and a Jewish club owner gave him an electric bass and said, you should learn how to play this, and he picked it up.
Oh, did you do an interview with him?
A long interview, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. So no, I mean, he was a stone horn player, and then he just picked up the electric bass when he was out there, and I mean, him and Ed Green on every Motown record, every Barry White record, everything. So
Yeah. Wilton played on a lot of great records, and he played with Ed Green, played with Paul Humphrey, played on Let's Get It On, which is just one of the greatest of all time.
It's a big baby maker. Stan Getz, The Girl from Ipanema, was a big baby making song too.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that's the way it goes. The band with Charlie Smalls was Wilton, myself, Charlie, and a couple of singers, and we had these various gigs, and one of the gigs was that he got was at the Daisy, the Daisy Club in Beverly Hills, and so those gigs, like you'd see various different movie stars of the day. People would be coming in all dressed nice after dinner or something. They'd go to dance or to just hang out at the club. It was a very exclusive club, and so this one night we were playing, and we took a break like we always did, and during the break, I did what I did, which is kind of hang about and stuff, and then. At one point, I looked at my watch and I was trying to figure out what's going on. How come we're not back on the stand? So I went to Wilton, who was sitting in the back reading his Bible. He was such a devout man, and so I went to him and said, "Hey, Wilton, what do you suppose is going on? How come we're not playing?" And he said, "I don't know, but everybody seems to be huddled up in the coat room up at the front. Something's going on. Something happened or something." So I went up there to see what was going on, and they were saying that Robert Kennedy had just been shot at the Ambassador Hotel.
That's right.
And where he had been speaking, and that his entourage was slated to come by the Daisy and hang out and relax after that engagement, and so nobody knew what to do. Everybody was freaking out that he had been shot, of course, and so it was just an insane night, and it was so crazy that I cannot remember what I did the rest of that evening.
No, but the story the part of the story is that
and then
the organic food store.
Yeah, and then then of all things, the next day or the day after that, I'm reading the paper at home in Altadena, and I yelled out to my wife. I said, "Wow, the guy that killed Kennedy his name is Sirhan B. Sirhan, they say, and they say that his address is on Howard Street in Altadena." And I said, "That's 2 streets down from us here." And so I'm freaking out. I'm going, "Wow, what?" So then, as the article goes on, and I'm reading like that he was a stock boy at Wiedner's health food store on Lake Street. And so then I'm really freaked out because I'm picturing this guy now. I'm yelling this to my wife. I'm saying, "Babe, this guy is the guy that I stumble over on the weekends when I go in there to get my stuff, because it's a small store, little tiny aisles, and the stock boy was always on his knees down on the ground stocking stuff, from bottom up. And I'd always have to kind of, excuse me and jump over him or something." That's the guy.
Oh my God!
And so I flipped out. I never, I could never get over that. They talk about the 6 degrees of separation.
Sure.
And I mean, how do you figure that first of all, I had to go home early from the Daisy Club because Kennedy's party didn't show up.
Right.
And then he's killed by the guy, the stock boy, at the health food store where I used to go routinely. It's just it's just one of the freakiest things ever.
Yeah, I mean it's eerie. I mean, I'm sorry, I missed something. Did you actually get to see? They said he worked as a stock boy, or you never actually saw a picture of his face though, but you knew it was him.
No, they showed a picture of him.
Wow.
But they said he was a stock boy at Wiedner's health food store on Lake Street, and there's only one. That was a small little store. He couldn't afford more than one stock boy. That was the guy. And then later on, when they, I don't know if they showed his picture right then, but later on, when they showed the picture, it was obviously him. He was I can't say he was a nice guy because I don't remember him having any interaction with him, but he was, he was just a guy with a gig, and obviously he was much more than that. There was a lot of unrest. I don't know if I'd say hatred in his soul, but if you kill somebody, take somebody's life, I guess that comes under the heading of evil and hatred. I don't know. The man, he always said, Sirhan always said that it was political. And so...
there's other ways to make a political statement than...
Yeah, it would have been much better had he not taken the life of one of our iconic leaders, a guy who was just getting started. He could have done some great things, Robert. But in any case, I went through a period where I felt sorry for the guy because he was in the papers all the time, every day there for a while, and I kept thinking, God, this guy just lived down the street from us, and he worked at the store that I used to go into all the time. It was just so freaky, and I thought, how your life can change so quickly, just bad decisions, it's just, and it still happens today, people.
Well, and it was a profound,
horrible.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the most profound moments in our political history, and
yeah, exactly. It was right up there where they took his brother's life.
Absolutely.
One of our great presidents.
I mean, it's this is interesting. I've never actually talked to you about this, but I wanted to ask you about the first time that you actually met and saw or collaborated with Levon Helm.
Oh yeah, well, Yeah, hang on one second. The gardeners have just shown up, and it's really loud.
No problem, man. No, it's fine. It's fine.
With another phone. Hang on one second.
Talking to Jim Keltner here on the Jake Feinberg Show live on Power Talk, and he was just referring to a gig that he was on where he didn't understand why there was a break in the set, why they were taking such a long time, and it turned out that was the night that Robert Kennedy was assassinated by Sirhan. And so...
okay, I don't know. Can you hear that sound?
Yeah, it's noticeable, no doubt about it.
Okay, well, that's not good for the radio, is it?
No, it's not. No.
Okay, so let me go see if I can hide.
Go. You got a crawl space or a basement or something.
I've got a.
The gardeners have shown up.
You know what it is? It's not the lawnmower. It's the blower.
Exactly. Well, I hear something. There's a noticeable buzz there.
What I'm going to do
is
I'm going to buy a what do you call it? An electric one or some kind of hydrogen one. I think they're making them now. And I'm going to keep it here at the house and insist that he use that one instead of that. That's the loudest friggin' thing.
Yeah, and it's. I don't want you telling historical stuff with that. Although now it's kind of died away.
Yeah, I just walked into the bathroom. Now I can't turn the fan on. Okay, so, all right, I'm in the dark completely here, sitting on the toilet. So I guess that's appropriate.
Totally. Levon.
Okay, so Levon,
yeah.
Levon. Well, Levon, man, I just I can't remember exactly how I met him, but I know it was something to do with Carl Radel, the bass player, my great friend and incredible bass player. Carl in those days turned me on to everything that was good. And one of them was the band.
Yes.
And the band's records were just amazing. They were totally different than what everybody else was doing. And so hanging out with Levon, I think Carl must have asked me to go with him or something. And I can't, chronologically,
I'm just wondering if maybe I can help. I don't know. Maybe it was around. I was going to also ask you about because Pat Garrity and Billy the Kid, the soundtrack with Dylan, that was all around the time that they were beginning to play together. And I know the band spent some time. They rented out Sammy Davis Jr.'s house out there. I just wonder.
Well, that's where I hung out with him.
You did.
Yeah, that's where I ended up there somehow.
Somehow you got yeah.
And we hung out for a couple of days. I would watch them play, and it was extraordinary. It was just extraordinary. He was playing those old drums, and he was playing a real interesting pattern on the hi-hat. He'd pull up the stick he'd pull up his right hand from the hi-hat as he came down on the snare drum for the backbeat, and I thought that was amazing, and it sounded different. It took away the sound of the metal with the drum at the same time from the hi-hat, and it was just extraordinary. And then his singing was just mesmerizing. He was just one of the great singers of all time. Just one. I guess some people would call him a stylist, right? But you just could not get enough of his singing, and on any of the songs that he was singing, and they all were incredible singers. Every one of those guys in the band, but hanging out with Levon, the night that we hung out, we were talking so much, and at one point, I said to him, "Man, if I could just hit one tom-tom and just just make it sound and be in the right spot just the way you do, man, I would trade all my chops for that. And he said, oh, no, Jimmy. God damn, man, if I could just play those damn little rolls that you do. And I'll just never forget him saying that, you know. And I said, oh, man, Levon, I'll trade you. But what happened was, after that, I completely changed. It wasn't anything that I was actually really consciously trying to do. I didn't think, it didn't hit me like, wow, I'm going to change. It just started happening. And then I realized, as it was happening, that's what happened. I just didn't, I wasn't interested in playing a lot of stuff anymore like I was, you know. I was always messing with my chops, trying to get fast and play a lot of different stuff, and it just went away. I just kept wanting to hear that feel when I played, that feel that Levon played, and then that, of course, combined with having already kind of done that with Ringo. You know, trying to play like Ringo, where it was very, very much to the point. Like, you know, what does the song want to do right here? What's the best way to make the song feel the best right here? And Ringo always had that so together. Ringo always just made the song sound and feel so fantastic, and it never was about technique. So that started that whole thing for me.
Really?
Of undoing everything that I knew technique-wise and stuff. Well, that's what I thought I had to do. I think later, you know, I thought that's what I had to do, but I realized later on that it was very fortunate for me to have early on in my life learned some technique, you know, practiced and took some lessons from a teacher, Forrest Clark, who was with the L.A. Phil. You know, he taught me my left hand. What I was doing with my left hand was awful. I wasn't utilizing it at all. And he showed me how to use the fingers and do the whole thing, and that just really. I only took a few lessons from him, but it started me on that road, and I practiced constantly for a long time to get that down. And then it became just part of, you know, just a natural thing for me. And but as I started doing that, I started playing more and being infatuated with my chops. And so it was a good thing that I had all of that before I decided to undo it.
Exactly. No, I was going to say, you were able to peel it back, and then you could.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was. I mean, you. This is something I want. Well, let me play this sound clip for you, another one, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
Okay.
When we were playing in Chicago, just about 3 or 4 days, he had his foot on the hi-hat. He never played the hi-hat. Didn't play the hi-hat for 3 days. I thought I was going to go crazy. He just set his foot on. I don't know if he had an argument with his wife or not, but he just set his foot on the hi-hat, and he was just playing time on the cymbal. And then once in a while, he hit the bass drum, and just we just played for 3 days. And of course, all these drummers came in to hear, you know, a Buddy Rich solo, and that's why they would basically show up.
Sure.
You know, I mean,
sure.
You know, I had to Buddy play one of his 15-minute, you know, amazing solos where you think he was going to have a heart attack any minute. But it was just like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Just play some time. It was nice. It was great.
Okay, so that was Mike Mainieri, the Vibes player. Talking about playing with Buddy in a sextet, and for 3 days he did not touch the bass drum. And I, you know, it's interesting because I want to. It made me think of you, because cats like you and Levon, Ron Tutt, the list goes on and on and on. But the thing is that the bass drum was not that relevant as a timekeeper the way it became once rock and roll music became really ingrained in the mid-'70s. And I just wanted you to talk about how Levon used the bass drum and how you use the bass drum, how that changed over time, because you hear the double bass drums now and it just sucks up. It makes a lot of noise. And to me, those cats, going back to the original point, keeping time on the cymbals. I mean, some of those cats, Elvin and, Philly Joe and Max Roach, I mean, they were rhythmists. They were dancing on those cymbals. And I know that I'm right that in the sense that younger drummers today don't recognize the cymbals as not just colors, but even timekeepers, because Reggie Workman, Coltrane's bass player who I talked to, and rest in peace, another Crusader, Joe Sample, they both said you could see drummers in their 50s today, and they don't play. You go see a 45-minute set of music, and they don't touch the cymbals.
Yeah, well, that's culture. That's cultural.
No, and I know that. I just, what it is? It's like when it comes from those two cats, it's not coming from Jake Feinberg. What I'm saying is how your use of the bass drum changed over time, especially during that critical Gary Lewis, and then the idea that when you got into the folk stuff with Dylan, but ultimately in the studio, it's very noticeable. You can hear that when that bass drum just started to sound like a machine. It started sounding like a machine gun. I just wanted you to talk.
Well, bass drum, bass drum in the early days of drumming was big and open, and so it was if you played it at all, you played it kind of easy, kind of quiet, and kind of down in the groove, like supporting down at the bottom of the groove. And then when you wanted to explode, then bang, and they used to ride on the bass drum. They used to play 4 on the floor a lot on the bass drum. Talking way early.
Papa Joe.
Yeah, Papa Joe and Krupa and Buddy. I think all of them.
Don Lamond, yeah.
They all did that, I think. But as bebop started to show up, they started letting the bass handle the bottom end like that, and then they would throw bombs, as they call it, And it was very interesting. Stan Levy, man, never gets the attention that Max always does, and probably rightfully so. I mean, Max Roach is the icon of bebop drumming, but Stan Levy, Stan's story. I don't know if you know Stan.
Well, no, I mean I know Angela very well, and honestly,
there should be a movie on Stan Levy's life because it's so weird. He just was this weird savant guy.
Right.
He was this huge kid, and with a lot of moxie, And he goes to Dizzy at some point and asks him if he can sit in. That's a classic story. Everybody knows that story. But then Dizzy, being who Dizzy is, he said, "Sure, kid." He wanted to give him a shot. He said, "All right, if you talk big, let's see what you got." And he played his butt off. He just completely started playing his butt off. Played these fast tempos. He was left-handed, and these are stories that Stan was telling me, Charlie Watts and I, when we went to visit him. And so my point was, so you had a drum set then, right? He said, "No, I never owned a drum set." So how did he get to do that? Well, it's the same thing, I guess, as when, how did Buddy Rich, when he was 5 years old, sound like playing a snare drum solo, sound like he did when he was 28? There's some kind of thing going on there, some kind of savant thing going on, or whatever it was. But my point is that Stan it's great to hear him play that stuff the way he would drop those bombs. you couldn't hear a bass drum at all. Just ching, 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 ching. Beautiful time, and then suddenly he'd drop a bomb. And that's early bebop. That's what Max Roach perfected and brought to the table, and then everybody that came after Max.
Kenny Clark kind of was the also Stan. Actually, I've been listening to Stan a lot in big band settings with Stan Levy, and he also played with Getz in small groups, and he's great. I think that
Stan Levy was so underrated.
Yeah.
Such an underrated drummer. It might be because he wasn't a real nice guy. He was like he came. That's why I say there should be a movie on his life, because the way he came up was amazing. His dad was a real hard case, and he came up as a. You should read his book. That's what you should do.
Yeah, no.
Read his book, because it's really a fun read, and it'll tell you all kinds of stuff it'll explain a lot of stuff to you. Because I remember going to the clubs, being here in Southern California. I saw Shelley play all the time, and then the rare occasion would be when Philly Joe would come to town with Miles. Then the really and that was a big deal. That was an incredible big deal to see Philly Joe playing live at the peak of his game with Miles Davis was unreal. It just was amazing. And then how could that be topped? Only by Elvin coming to town with Train. And those two things right there was enough to change your whole life, your whole viewpoint on music.
I know.
But to get back to, but when I was very young, still in high school, the people I saw were Shelley Mann. I saw Stan Levy, and Shelley was beautiful in that you could go up to him and say hello or talk to him, and he just would stand there and talk to you like you were somebody in his family. And in fact, I've told this story many times where I called one time. I think I was 16 or 17, and I called. How in the heck I got his number, I have no idea, but I called the number, and a woman answered, and it was his wife. Later on, I found out it was Flip, his wife. And I said, I don't remember how I said it, but I said, I want to talk to Shelley. And she said, oh, well, he's asleep right now, but I'll wake him up. What do you want to? And so she got Shelley up. Shelley Mann wakes up for my call, and I say to him, I can't imagine that I said Mr. Mann, so I must have said, Shelley, what size are your hi-hats? Now, this man answered my question and gave me that amount of time, and I will never forget that. I used to love telling Shelley that. We became friends later on, really good friends. And but he always cracked up when I, because he didn't remember probably that I did that. But the point being that he was a real sweetheart. Stan, on the other hand, gave you the look when if you'd seen him, and you're a young kid and you're watching him play and you're fascinated, and then you want to go say something to him, and you're looking at him, and he glances up and says, "Don't even think about it." You see that look in his eye that's saying that. It's just like, no, this man doesn't want to talk to me.
Right. Well, those guys were all, yeah.
And he had that. That was the kind of a thing. He was, Shelley was from the East, but he didn't. He came up different. Stan Levy came up real hard, man. Philadelphia, and.
Well, I mean, listen. There's no debate. I've interviewed since we last talked, and I've been on this film production for Getz. I've interviewed 4 cats, and Levy was. They were all smacked up. A lot of them. That was very prevalent at that time.
Yeah.
I don't know about Shelley, but Stan. I mean,
no, Shelley didn't. Shelley didn't.
So I think that Stan's playing.
Shelley took Dexedrines.
Right.
He took pills.
Keltner, I need to talk to you about this because I talked to Butch Trucks a couple weeks ago, and it was just such a blast. And he was very clear. The Grateful Dead were the first group to have two drummers. And then he talked about J-Mo and him and the kind of way they worked off each other. But I'm always saying to myself, wait a minute, dude, Mad Dog and Englishman, double drums, Keltner and Gordon. I mean, can you talk about, in a live setting, how you guys worked together? Were you keeping time and he was playing Phil? I mean,
we didn't do that. You know, the Butch and those guys, the way they do it, and the way Derek Trucks and his wife, you know, and Susan, they're great band.
Yeah.
The way they do it, they all do it like they do it the right way. I think, you know, they sort of work it out and stuff. I never liked playing double drums because I didn't. I always felt like, I mean, while we were playing, it felt okay, but then I'd hear it back, and I would think, oh, well, why in the hell are we doing this? What's the purpose of two drums? It's too much going on, and so then somebody would back off. It would always be me. I would be the one. I wouldn't want to play much when it was like, you know, double drums. And then somebody would invariably tell me, no, play. We want you to play. Go ahead, you know, don't. And so then, but the thing with Mad Dogs, with me and Jimmy, was that Jimmy was really strong. He was a big guy.
Yeah.
And he played big. He played very strong, firm, very precise too. His time was beautiful, and he was kind of the exact opposite of me.
Stop it!
No. I don't. I'm telling you, you know, the way my perception of the whole thing is that I always felt like, no, I have a good time. I'm not saying that I don't have a good time and all that, but I have a different concept of time than Jimmy, and I had a different feel for playing fills,
right,
and all that, because I was coming from a different place than Jimmy. Jimmy, his influences were different than mine, and so plus he had already had studio experience. He was already playing on records, and plus he was you know, he was with Hal and Hal Blaine and Earl Palmer on dates where they're playing where Hal and Earl are at the peak of their game, and Jimmy is a young guy coming in watching them. You know, so he had, his influences were fantastic. There we had the same. That's where we came together. We did have the same influences from like Hal and Earl. But earlier on, my influences were Elvin and Philly Joe and Roy Haynes and that stuff, and then Don Lamond, you know, and what's his name, Sonny Payne.
Oh yeah.
And you know, those kind of guys, and so that's what I kind of brought to the table, or that's what I wanted to bring to the table, and Jimmy Dickinson, the producer from down in Alabama, he was a real good friend, and we did a lot of work with Ry Cooder throughout the years. He said one time in an interview that Jimmy Gordon, somebody must have asked him about us, and he said Jimmy Gordon has a military feel. He plays with a military kind of feel style, and then I forgot what he said about me. He said some other thing where I was coming from, but when I read that, I thought, okay, yeah, that's true. That's what it is. Jimmy, his exactness and his precision around the drums was always something that I wanted to emulate. I mean, it wasn't always something I wanted to emulate. When I first heard him play, I said, I want to do that. And so I made it my business to really listen and to try to copy him. and then once I got to know him, and they were pairing us up, with double drum stuff. That's when I realized that I didn't want to do that anymore. I didn't, I was up close, and I was thinking, no, I don't want to play like that. He's doing that already. I want to do something. I want to do what I'm hearing in my head. So I basically the actual Mad Dogs tour itself. I've said this in other interviews. Jimmy did most of the work, playing like the time. I was playing time with him all the time, and you can hear the feel. It's different than Jimmy Gordon's time by itself, but it was appropriate for that band because Leon wanted it to be kind of wild and loose. He didn't want a studio band, and so I knew that because I'd played with Leon a lot, and so that's where I was going. So I would let Jimmy, kind of, I'd coast a little bit. I'd still be playing the time, but I would coast. And then when it came time to play fills, I'd play a fill, and Jimmy would play a fill. Sometimes we'd play them together, and but when you listen to the records, you can hear his fills compared to my fills, and his playing was very military-like, and it was good. I mean, it served him well on the records that he played on. Most of the records he played on.
Was there a discernible difference in in a live tour with you and Jimmy in the double drums setting with Cocker or with the Mad Dogs, or is there something you can point to? Because the Allmans or the Grateful Dead, their live shows, you could not compare it to the studio stuff. And I just wanted to know if there was something I could listen to, if you could point me in the direction of something that could really show where you could hear the two different time feels working. If there's even a live.
Well,
yeah.
I didn't. Double drumming has not been, like I said, I never liked it. So I'm not playing double drums on a lot of records. I did the time that I loved the most double drumming was with Ringo on Bangladesh, and I think that was maybe the very first time. Why
did you love that one?
Because Ringo and I shared a heartbeat, and it was because I think it was because I listened to Ringo. So how could you not listen to Ringo? He was everywhere. The Beatles songs were everywhere. Everywhere you go, you hear Beatles songs, Beatle music, and especially if you're starting to do studio stuff and playing on records and things, that I wanted to sound like that so badly. I had gotten pretty good with doing Hal, and I say that now, and qualifying with, you listen to the old Hal stuff that he did, and you realize, no, you didn't come close to it.
What's that like? What's the early Hal, like Fifth Dimension or before that?
Oh, Fifth Dimension. You mentioned that's the first one you mentioned. That's a great one to mention.
Well, because I was transcribing
Wedding Bell Blues.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Those kinds of grooves, just the regular kind. You sit down as a drummer and try to play that groove. That's a hard thing to do.
It is. No, simple is not as simple as it seems. That's what that's what Gadd said to me.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, Steve Gadd epitomizes that. Steve Gadd, everybody thinks, not everybody, but a lot of drummers would hear him playing on records and never think that it was Steve Gadd because it was just so simple. But yeah, that's.
But here's the point, because I want to be clear about this similar heartbeat thing with Ringo. It's when you're playing, is it that you're playing in unison together? You're feeding off each other. It just feels right. I mean, when you're
I did was when I played with Ringo, the first thing I did was I told myself, okay, I'm not going to play the hi-hat, very very little on the hi-hat. because to me that was what made the little engine run in Ringo's playing.
Mm-hmm.
Was the way he played his hi-hat. And so I just consciously was very minimal on my hi-hat, and when I would come down with the backbeat, I was amazed that I was right with him all the time. I just looked at him. I watched him a lot. And then pretty soon, I realized we couldn't do anything wrong. It was like, so if you listen to the Bangladesh record, that's a live record. Listen to that sometime. You won't hear two drums.
Right.
It's amazing. Phil Spector was recording it in the truck, and that's another reason why it was great. Phil Spector was one of my very, very, very favorite engineer producers in the world, and it's just so tragic that his life turned out the way it did. Unbelievably tragic, because I have such fantastic memories of being with Phil in the studio. I just can't say enough. I've tried to in many interviews, but because the world at large only knows him from TV,
right?
A trial, and that's just ridiculous. It's just so awful that it had to be like that. But anyway, the thing is that we, when we played together, Ringo and I, it was he said the same thing to me, that it was very easy, and I've always told Ringo that the reason why I think that we got together so easily was because I listened to him so much that my time feel just naturally was very similar to his, which is kind of on the backside.
Behind the beat a little bit.
No, not behind. It's incorrect to say behind the beat.
Okay.
It's just on the very backside of the beat.
Back of the beat.
Yeah.
I dig. I got so much going through my head, but because of our delayed start, I got to go pick up my kids. So maybe we can catch a hang again in the new year. I love talking to you, Keltner. It's
yeah. Well, listen. You what you do is you ask me a question, and I don't answer it. I go to somewhere else.
And that's exactly that's the Jake Feinberg show. It is total stream of consciousness. No, I mean, again, I appreciate. I love hanging with you, man. And the truth is that's my show, is that there aren't. The question is, you ask a question, but you go and wherever your mind takes you. Yeah. That's where it goes.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, then we're in good shape. Yeah, call back if you like. Today wouldn't be good after this.
No, we'll be in touch. I got a few more things I need to talk to you about, but enjoy your day, and love always. Merry Christmas to you, Keltner.
All right, Jake. Listen, yeah, you have a good one too. Have a good Hanukkah and Christmas, whatever. You probably do both, right?
Christmas actually.
Oh well, good.
Yeah,
good.
Yeah.
Well, then just do it in the right spirit,
Absolutely.
Let's remember all the great things that have been told to us that we should do, especially right now in this time where we're so easy to be hateful and resentful.
Yeah, and we're I've been pretty liberated because people like yourself have continued to get the memo about being a real human being and dropping knowledge on cats and peeps. I mean, before I let you go, I typed in to Google today Jim Keltner and Charles Lloyd, and the first thing that came up in Google search was a Facebook post that was shared by Wallace Roney that was written by me from our first interview about you talking about Charles Lloyd, about Miles Davis. So your knowledge will carry on well after we are gone from here, man. So
good.
Yeah, it's good, man. So I'll talk to you soon, Jimmy. Thank you so much, man.
All right. Okay, Jake. Have a good one, man.
Bye, buddy.
Bye-bye.
Just talk to a legendary drummer and a great human being, Jim Keltner. We got a little bit of a late start, but this will be airing on Christmas Eve. Until then, thank you so much. We'll be back on Saturday. We'll rejoin the Jim Parisi Show in progress.
And I'll say, that sounds great. Play half as much. And that's the challenge, is